Thank you. My questions will be mostly set towards Mr. Ward. Mr. Ward, in your previous testimony in ethics, I believe you agreed with the following statement. Please tell me if you still agree. Brookfield has been, over the last 5 years, one of Canada's most notorious and largest tax avoiders. Is that still your belief?
That is still my belief, yes.
Okay. Would I also be accurate in saying that from 2021 to 2024, there were about $23 billion in USD profits reported, but Brookfield only paid $2 billion with an effective rate of about 8%, and but if that money was reported in Canada, there'd be a 26% tax rate. Is that correct?
Yes, I mean, there are legitimate reasons why companies pay less than the statutory rate, but in the case of Brookfield, this is a pattern over a long period of time, which strongly suggests very aggressive tax avoidance, and the use of tax havens, Bermuda, particularly by Brookfield, is very clear and apparent.
Thank you. And in 2020, Prime Minister Mark Carney became co-chair of the Bermuda Registered Fund for Brookfield. From 2020 on, do you have any evidence that Mr. Carney attempted to reduce the excessive use of tax havens?
I have no evidence that Brookfield or Mr. Carney attempted to reduce the use of tax havens, and the tax haven usage by Brookfield has continued wholeheartedly, and that has impacted tax payments by Brookfield-owned or controlled companies both in Canada and in countries all around the world. I mean, I can give you numerous examples from Australia and many examples from Brazil and across Latin America where that's been the case.
Thank you. And I come from a rural riding, so I have to excuse this country analogy. But we would say in this situation, it looks a lot like the fox is actually guarding the henhouse here, in that we have an individual who presided over the usage of tax havens in an extraordinarily large amount, and now even he still holds shares, or one would believe that he still holds shares in a blind trust of Brookfield, where he actually stands to make money if we continue to use tax havens. So with that in mind, have you seen any serious or significant efforts made by the federal government since Prime Minister Carney became elected as Prime Minister to combat the use of tax havens?
No, I have not. And I will say that it was a really backward step for the G7 when it met in Canada to exempt U.S. multinationals from the OECD's Pillar 2 minimum tax, which was deeply flawed, but a small positive step in the right direction. And I will agree with Professor Deneau that the OECD is deeply, it is another example of putting the fox in charge of the henhouse. I can tell you that the Secretary General of the OECD was a long-serving finance minister in Australia and sought to reduce corporate tax payments in Australia. He was the head of tax now is also a former advisor to KPMG, who sold Microsoft a scheme of avoiding tax in Puerto Rico, which is now the largest tax bill in the world's history. The US IRS, prior to Trump, has been chasing Microsoft for $30 billion in taxes because it shifted profits to Puerto Rico, which under US law is a foreign jurisdiction. And we've done work in Canada that shows that Microsoft has done the same in Canada in terms of shifting profits, maybe not to Puerto Rico, but via Ireland. So there are lots of countries like Ireland, Luxembourg, Netherlands that are also tax havens, as well as Canada, the United States, and the UK functioning as tax havens.
You in your testimony, you talked a little bit about the Australian example of having reporting of foreign income made public, if I've got that correct. Have you tried to socialize that with the current federal government, and what response have you received?
We have talked to our friends and allies in Canada about pushing forward proposals around public country by country reporting, and I haven't been involved in direct conversations with the government, but we have been talking to our allies and friends in Canada to push that with the government. My understanding that there was an openness to that consideration, but I can't speak on behalf of that because I have not been directly involved in those conversations. But I will say this is
sorry, Mr. Ward, we're going to have to end it there. Thank you, Mr.
Thank you, Madam Chair. It's great to be back at the Finance Committee for this study of tax havens. Just to set the context a bit, tax havens are when rich and well-connected people and companies develop creative structures to try to avoid taxes. Tax avoidance is legal, but governments should try to prevent structures for tax avoidance that allow wealthy and well-connected people to exploit loopholes that aren't available to normal people. I think a lot of these issues are technical in nature, which means trust is very important, that the public can trust that their leaders are on their side, trying to solve these problems, trying to make the system more fair, and that they're not playing for the other team, which is why when you have a prime minister or other leaders that are personally invested in tax havens and that benefit from the continuing existence of these tax avoidance structures, that obviously creates problems for trust. They are personally invested in outcomes that are contrary to the public interest, contrary to what most people would want, which is solutions to the problems of aggressive tax avoidance, keeping money out of the system, and effectively requiring everyday hardworking Canadians to pay more taxes. Mr. Ward, you've done a lot of work specifically on Brookfield, as we've discussed, which used to be a company the Prime Minister led and that he's still invested in. I wonder if you could speak to the issues of trust and conflict of interest around having a prime minister, having leaders in general who are on the one hand maybe professing to be concerned about these problems, but on the other hand are personally invested in the continuing existence of structures that allow tax avoidance for their own advantage.
Well, I mean, to piggyback on comments made by Professor Deneau, I mean, I think trust is deeply undermined. I think the general public in Canada is widely aware that some of the largest multinationals, Brookfield included, and lots of U.S. multinationals, pay such low tax rates when workers who get paycheck and payroll deduction of their taxes pay full freight and expect more for their dollar from public services. It completely undermines trust in the system if you have small business operators who can't afford to hire big four accounting firms, who can't afford to hire a team of tax lawyers, who can't set up Swiss bank accounts and tax haven subsidiaries. They're paying the bills for the big corporations that are using those same services, and it completely undermines trust in the tax system and in public institutions overall. I think this is the reason why you have people like Donald Trump and Bolsonaro, because people have been impacted negatively by globalization, whereas they can see that the richest and most powerful in the world are benefiting from this system that they designed, they continue to influence, and they continue to write the rules on. And I think, I completely agree with Mr. Deneau in terms of a unitary taxation where you're looking at a company as its whole and taxing it as a whole entity. And that does happen in 27 United States. And there's an opportunity to close a loophole in those states so that they're not able to shift income offshore and that income. So there's a model that exists. This was part of the OECD Pillar 1 proposal, a small part of it. So it's been legitimized as a practice. And it really needs to carry forward. And
thank you. Can I just for a further point of precision in the minute or so I have left? So what you're describing is people that are designing the rules and also personally benefiting from the rules, allowing tax havens to continue to operate. What you have with Mark Carney being our prime minister, coming from Brookfield, continuing to be invested in Brookfield, it's effectively like having someone say, okay, now I'm the referee, now I'm adjudicating the system, or supposed to be adjudicating the system in public interest, but I'm still on the payroll of one of the teams, right? It's got someone coming from Brookfield, benefiting financially from Brookfield using these aggressive tax avoidance structures while in a position where they're supposed to be defending the public interest, but they're personally invested in an outcome that is at best partisan to one side of it, but likely is contrary to the public interest and the common good in general.
Very brief response, please. You have 5 seconds.
Absolutely. I mean, I think that you have to have trust in the system, and that if Mark Carney wants to come clean as the Prime Minister and move forward on this, I think that the government should be putting forward legislation on public country-by-country reporting.
Thank you, Mr. Ward. Thank you. That concludes the time.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. Thank you for that presentation, Mr. Deneau. It was quite illuminating. If I understand you correctly, you spoke about all sorts of different costs, social costs, and the various impacts of tax havens. And I get the sense that we are changing our own policies and our own standards in order to compete with tax havens. Have I understood you correctly? And in the Income Tax Act, there is a regulation, 5902, that bans double taxation. And it would seem that the government is then contradicting itself. Do you have other examples of government regulations for the Income Tax Act which contribute to a situation where we are manipulating our policies to compete with tax havens? I don't know if I'll have enough time to go into full detail, but I would refer you to my book, which is entitled Canada, A New Tax Haven. In that book, I outline the history of tax havens, the most controversial ones in the world, Trinidad and Tobago, the Cayman Islands, the Bahamas. These tax havens were created by Canada. Canada was very influential in the British Caribbean, and really these Caribbean countries were turned into tax havens by Canada. Unfortunately, we are the sorry cause of this sad affair. Yes, there is a treaty of non-double taxation, a treaty we signed with Barbados. There was a vote on all that. I won't get into the details. That treaty would have made sense if we had signed it with a country with a similar tax rate to Canada's. For example, Germany. It makes total sense to shift funds around and to conduct business transactions with Germany because they have a legitimate, serious tax rate. It would make sense to sign a non-double taxation agreement with them. But why would we sign such an agreement with Barbados, where the tax rate is 1% max? All this does is it lets financial funds create this illusion where money is sent to Barbados, it is barely taxed, and then it comes back to Canada, and the businesses say, oh, it's already been subject to taxation, so you can't tax it a second time. Canada is the one who created all of these loopholes. We can very well play the fool and say, oh, the OECD can handle this and point the finger elsewhere, but we are the creators of this problem. Thank you. In your opening remarks, you spoke about political and diplomatic solutions. Our colleague, Mr. Leitao, asked you more questions about this. But towards the end, you spoke about the taxation of the consolidated balance sheet. What did you mean by that, and could you go into more detail? Well, we got to get out of the 19th century, where we got to get out of this idea where multinationals are treated as a single actor. That is not true anymore. Multinationals a series of entities who can exchange debt, exchange funds, do all sorts of crazy things. All of these entities are united under a board, and they are subject to local taxes in the countries where they are operating. If we want to bring taxation into the modern age, we could look at that. We could tax multinationals directly on income they made in our country. We could say you owe X percent of your consolidated balance sheet, that is all of your financial operations, no matter where they are in the world, whether they are storing their money in Hong Kong or Bermuda or Luxembourg. But in order to make this happen, there would need to be political will and a certain technical competence.
Est-ce qu'il y a, oui, est-ce que actuellement il y a des États?
Currently, are there any countries who use this measure? I don't know any such countries. I'll let Mr. Ward speak on that if he wishes to. I will say that all too often we act like we cannot do anything alone, but we could actually set an example. We can pass a bill taxing companies based on their consolidated balance sheet. And then we can even say this only comes into effect after a certain percentage of OECD member states pass similar laws. Thank you, Mr. Deneau. We'll have to stop you there.